vote in Parliament tomorrow. We'll find out what MPs think in PMQs in just a moment. Elsewhere, a Marine commander in Mariupol says his forces could have just hours left, but won't surrender to Russia. He released a video message from the besieged city, which he said could be his last. The mayor of Mariupol says he hopes to evacuate 6,000 civilians in a convoy of 90 buses today. And Westminster Magistrates Court formally issued an order to extradite WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange to the US. It's now up to the Home Secretary Priti Patel to approve, although an appeal could be launched yet at the High Court. He's wanted in the US over an alleged conspiracy to obtain and disclose national defence information. Assange has always denied wrongdoing. We'll have a full news roundup at 5:30, but now it's time for this.
PMQs Unpacked on Times Radio. Unpacking the politics and cutting through the crossfire.
Order, order. I call Matt Chorley and Patrick Maguire.
Patrick Maguire is here looking very smart.
I always have a job interview on a Wednesday afternoon.
You,
court appearance.
Well, this is a good excuse for you to get on the YouTube. You can see Patrick Maguire's got a tie on and everything.
Exactly.
So these are serious times if you've got a tie on. Serious times for Boris Johnson. Do we think today's PMQs is going to be a rerun of yesterday's statement, or will Keir Starmer go for something else?
It's a really interesting question. I wonder if Keir Starmer will be a bit wary about rehashing old ground so quickly. But then again, we know it's a very fertile plura for Labour to plough, as it were. So I wouldn't be surprised. Maybe we'll hear more about Ukraine. Perhaps he'll ask about the Prime Minister's upcoming trip to India and whether he can reconcile global Britain's trading ambitions with his attempts to chivvy India to a more pro-Western position on Ukraine.
I don't know if you can explain this to me. How is it okay for Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak to leave the country tomorrow, while every other Tory MP has had their leave slips, whipping operations torn up, and they've been told they've got to be here tomorrow?
I did think that too, and it does raise the question of who's going to respond for the government to that Labour motion. In previous Partygate flashpoints in Parliament, Michael Ellis, the Cabinet Office Minister, perhaps the most boring man to ever been elected to Parliament, to call him a straight bat, I think, does an injustice to all the great raconteurs that have been straight bats in the history of Parliament. He is beyond boring and sort of, a charisma vacuum. Sorry, this is a horrible, unnecessary vicious ad hominem about poor Michael Ellis.
But, I mean, that's essentially his job. He's been sent out as a fairly anonymous straight batter to just try and kill the story. I mean, in the past, when at the height of the Brexit shenanigans, there was a sort of vote of no confidence in Theresa May. Michael Gove did a sort of virtuoso performance.
Oh, that was classic Gove, wasn't it? It was Gove versus Watson in the summing up. It was sort of like a glimpse into a parallel universe where neither Jeremy Corbyn nor Theresa May exist, and it was actually quite fun. I remember that 10 minutes. So maybe Michael Gove would be put up, maybe Dominic Raab. But yeah, as you say, crucially, not the Prime Minister, and certainly not Rishi Sunak.
Yes, and whether or not Michael Gove wants to tether himself to this particular row is an interesting question as well. Right, but thank you for joining us all. If you're watching along on the YouTubes, hello from Indiana, says Marie. Hi from Holland, says someone else. Stephen in Taunton. Someone in Shoreditch. I'm probably wave out the window and see you. Timothy is in sunny and warm Oslo in Norway. Dawn in Crosby. Hello from sunny Chorley.
Is the guy from Taunton a close personal friend of yours who you've paid to...
Stephen P. I mean, that could be anyone. Elliot says, first time watching as well as listening. Very exciting, enjoying the deconstructed jacket, Matt. What does that mean?
It's like, how in M&S they don't sell suits anymore. Yeah, you can just buy a jacket and trousers. Yeah. And
I bought this from a charity shop.
Well, I actually do have a full suit from M&S on, so...
Well, we don't need to see your trousers. Right, here we go then. This is PMQs Unpacked, live on Times Radio. We go live to the House of Commons. This is Keir Starmer's question number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I join the Prime Minister in wishing Her Majesty a happy birthday? Yeah. Why did the Prime Minister's press secretary, Allegra Stratton, have to resign from her job?
Yeah. Minister.
Sorry. I bitterly regret Allegra's resignation. I think it was very sad. And I think she did an outstanding job. I do. Particularly since she was the one who coined the expression coal, cars, cash and trees, which enabled the UK to deliver a fantastic COP26 summit last year.
That, even by Boris Johnson's standards, was a quite acrobatic segue, wasn't it? Away from Partygate to COP26, which happened many months ago.
It's an interesting question. So the question that's been posed repeatedly is that she resigned, having spoken, that leaked video of her laughing apparently about a party that happened at Number 10. My understanding is she did attend the party. There has been this speculation that she's resigned over a party she didn't go to. But my understanding is that she did. However, her treatment is slightly stark contrast to almost everyone else.
Well, she is one of the very few people to have resigned. Certainly the only person with a meaningful public profile to have resigned. And it hasn't escaped the notice of the public that it is the high-profile woman who's carried the can rather than Boris Johnson or Rishi Sunak. It's going to be really interesting to see how Keir Starmer prosecutes this line of argument, given Boris Johnson. I would put my house on Boris Johnson not answering a single one of the questions that we're about to hear directly. So it'd be interesting to see how Starmer develops this line of argument. Robert.
Will we get the 36th apology? That's the big question. Right, let's go back. This is question 2 from Keir Starmer.
Allegra Stratton laughed at breaking the rules. She resigned. The Prime Minister then claimed he was furious at her behaviour and accepted her resignation. Professor Neil Ferguson broke the rules. He also resigned. The Prime Minister said that was the right thing to do. The former Health Secretary broke the rules. He too resigned.
Matt Hancock.
The Prime Minister tried to claim he sacked him. Why does the Prime Minister think everybody else's actions have consequences except his own?
I thank the right honourable gentleman. I feel he's in some kind of Doctor Who time warp. We had this conversation yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I've explained why I bitterly regret receiving an FPN. I apologise to the House, but he asks about the actions for which I take responsibility, and I'll tell him we're going to get on with delivering for the British people, making sure that we power out of the problems that COVID has left us, and more people in work than there were before the pandemic, Mr. Speaker, fixing our energy problems and leading the world in standing up to the aggression of Vladimir Putin. Those are all subjects about which I think he could reasonably ask questions now.
Stop asking me about this. Let's talk about something else.
I don't think Keir Starmer is going to take him up on that invitation. I was interested, given that we heard Brandon Lewis on the broadcast around yesterday lead with, and Tory MPs are doing this now, government spokespeople saying, oh, well, what about Keir Starmer's beer in that office in Durham? As much as you get the contrition from the Prime Minister, oh, I'm really sorry I received an FPN, the public have the right to, expect better. There is an attempt to create the impression that everybody was breaking the rules, not least Keir Starmer. But interesting, the Prime Minister didn't go for that then. He is clearly, and this is a message for Tory MPs as much as anything else, business as usual. I am a world statesman, and don't distract me with this little local difficulty. It's
interesting that Keir Starmer is clearly, as is his way as a barrister, try to sort of prosecute an argument. We see interested to see where he goes next. He starts with Allegra Stratton, then he throws in Neil Ferguson, the former government advisor who had to resign after he was visiting
a paramour.
Yes, exactly right. Which is at that point was it controversial. There was obviously Matt Hancock as well. Interesting, Boris Johnson now referring to as an FPN to just try and play down even more what exactly.
Well, again, FPN, speeding ticket.
Just a speeding ticket.
Yeah, exactly.
Just a speeding ticket. Just a bit. It would be fine if he was done for speeding. Right. Let's go back then. This is question number 3. You listen to PMQs Unpacked here on Times Radio.
These are strange answers from a man who yesterday claimed to be making a humble apology. Does the Prime Minister actually accept that he broke the law?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I've been absolutely clear that I humbly accept what the police have said. I've paid the fixed penalty notice. And, Mr. Speaker, what I think the country and what I think the whole House would really rather do is get on with the things for which we were elected, deliver on our promises to the British people. And you could not have clearer evidence of the intellectual bankruptcy of Labour. They have no plans. They have no plans for energy. They have no plans for social care. and they have no...
Oh, Lindsay Hall's not happy.
Speaker, to fix the economy.
Prime Minister, sit down. I want to hear what you've got to say, but I can't hear when you're talking that way. I'm here in the chair. Please, if you can help me. No, I think we'll have had enough.
Oh, he's cut him off altogether after that. I think, we could hear him perfectly well, but I think there was a suggestion that Boris Johnson was not looking towards the Speaker's chair.
It's a rank discourtesy to Sir Lindsay, yeah.
I thought he was going to tick him off for going on about Labour doesn't have an energy policy.
No, so did I. And Rishi, God, he might follow Selwyn Lloyd in being a Chancellor who became Speaker. That's one for PMQs Unpacked 2035.
That's top quality Patrick Maguire trivia.
Yeah, but Lindsay Hall has been very interventionist. You know, for a man who ran as the anti-Burko, he has been...
he does like to stick his oar
He
in.
does.
Yeah. I'm not sure that Keir Starmer asking, does the Prime Minister accept that he broke the law, was the best use of question number 3.
No, although I wonder whether he's going to say, has the Prime Minister read the Ministerial Code that he wrote the forward for that, stipulates in the first line or the second line or whatever that it's the paramount duty of ministers to obey the law. I think it wouldn't surprise me if that were, part of Keir Starmer's... Columbo, just one more thing, sort of routine.
1.1.3 of the Ministerial Code. The Ministerial Code should be read against the background of the overarching duty on ministers to comply with the law and to protect the integrity of public life. So maybe that's what he was drafting at.
It's all going very well so far.
It's all going very well so far. Let's go back. This is PMQs Unpacked, where you can watch along on YouTube, where I think you're voting on whether or not Boris Johnson should resign. 83% say should. You can go on YouTube, search Times Radio and subscribe and watch along. We go back to the House of Commons. Question 4 from Keir Starmer.
The state of it, the party of Peel and Churchill reduced to shouting and screaming in defence of this lawbreaker.
Now then, that's the last time that Peroni that you just asked about, you might have to go and take it. I don't hear any more, or else you will be drinking. Keir Starmer.
That's Lindsay Hall ticking off.
So, Mr. Speaker, yesterday's apology lasted for as long as the Prime Minister thought necessary to be clipped for the news. But once the cameras were off, the Prime Minister went to see his backbenchers, and he was back to blaming everyone else. He even said that the Archbishop of Canterbury had not been critical enough of Putin. In fact, the Archbishop called Putin's war an act of great evil, and the Church of England has led the way in providing refuge to those fleeing. Would the Prime Minister like to take this opportunity to apologise for slandering the Archbishop and the Church of England?
An atheist asks a Catholic, citation needed. Boris Johnson does never weirdly want to confirm that, to apologise for slandering the Archbishop of Canterbury.
When they got married?
Yeah.
They got married in
Westminster Cathedral. Yeah.
So that's some confirmation of Boris Johnson's religious status. We should point out, just before we hear Boris Johnson's response, that this row has sort of escalated today. So you had Archbishop of Canterbury Justin Welby criticised the plan to send migrants to Rwanda for processing at the weekend. Boris Johnson then accused the Archbishop of being less vociferous in his condemnation of President Putin than he was of the British government. Then accused him of misconstruing government policy. Well, this morning, the Church of England, John Bingham, who's the head of news at the Church of England, I wasn't aware they had one of those.
He's a very nice man. I've met him.
Well, there we are. Yeah. He's accused the Prime Minister of a disgraceful slur. The mudslinging continues. Let's see if the Prime Minister wants to try and patch things up with the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Mr. Speaker, I think the right honourable gentleman. I was slightly taken aback to be Sorry, Mr. Speaker. I was slightly taken aback for the government to be criticised over the policy that we have devised to end the deaths at sea in the Channel as a result of cruel criminal gangs. I was surprised that we were attacked for that. And actually, Mr. Speaker, it turns out that policy, do you know who proposed that policy, first of all, in 2004? It was David Blunkett, Mr. Speaker, who said it was a 21st, yes it was, and you'll remember, a 21st century solution to the problems of illegal asylum seeking and immigration. He should stick with, he's a Corbynister in a smart Islington suit. That's the truth.
lot to say there. I mean, you've got the germ of the Tory 2024 campaign there.
Yeah.
He's a Corbynista in a suit. Indeed, actually, that was Keir Starmer's leadership pitch in 2020. But anyway, we don't talk about that anymore.
But Corbyn's been in the building. You'll be able to hear Jeremy Corbyn later on
very much looking forward
Drive with John Pena. He didn't pop in to say hello for some reason.
After all you did for him.
After everything I've done for him. It's been interesting. The Tories, they have been rooting around in this is the most detail I've had on the this was Labour's idea first claim, suggesting that David Blunkett first thought of this, offshoring migrants.
Wasn't quite the same. I think that was a detention centre for people whose claims were found to be invalid or were definitely illegal, rather than the Rwanda plan, which is to send single men seeking asylum, regardless of circumstance, to Rwanda, right?
And actually, the main problem with it is it's certainly the way they've pitched this is copying Australia. This isn't some Labour policy that they've picked up. I think it's also, what's that, 12? How many years ago is that? It's 18 years ago. It's quite a long time ago to I'm not sure
David Blunkett, one for the kids.
Yeah, I'm not sure Boris Johnson has necessarily adheres to all of his positions from 18 years ago.
Certainly
possibly
not.
Even not 18 months ago.
It's interesting, though. That was definitely the warmest, fullest cheer from the Tory benches for the mention of the Rwanda policy. We know that is something that really gets Tory MPs, particularly backbench elected in 2019, riled up. You speak to a Tory MP, as I spoke to a few of them last night on the Commons terrace. They all say, my constituencies don't give, couldn't give less of a
hoot.
A hoot. Sorry, yeah, I was really groping for a suitable word for a family radio station there. About Partygate, what they care about is small boats. Even if you're talking to, a MP from a landlocked constituency deep in the Nottinghamshire coalfield, they say they really care about the small boats. So that's why Boris Johnson will emphasise this.
It's interesting, because I was chatting to one Tory MP who said it doesn't really matter whether it works. It's given them something to say when on the doorstep this keeps coming up. The small boats is a massive. They now have an answer to that question. They've got a policy, and actually the Archbishop of Canterbury slagging it off probably helps to rise, push it up public consciousness.
Well, yeah, and also let's not get into a long discussion about the sociology of religion, although I'm sure listeners would love it.
Yesterday with Finkelfitch, we ended up arguing about what God looks like, which was not what I was.
But fewer church attendance is declining every year. The Conservative Party is no longer the Anglican Church is no longer the Conservative Party at prayer. I think it's pretty risk-free for the Prime Minister to have a pop at Justin Welby these days politically, I think.
And actually the point that Daniel Finkelstein was making yesterday is that the sort of people who do still go to church probably are long-standing Conservatives who want something done on this subject as well. So, it probably doesn't.
And probably wish
risk.
Justin would put his tambourine away and abide by a more traditional liturgy or whatever.
Mark has been in touch saying, can everyone tell me why answers are always directed to the speaker and opponents are spoken of in the third person? It's a sort of politeness thing, isn't it?
Yes,
it is. Somebody else replied to say, if in doubt, it's down to tradition, which is true.
They can only speak through the speaker.
Yes, so you're speaking through the speaker. So it doesn't become as aggressive as you're a liar. You have to say he's a liar, then you get told off because you can't say liar.
Yeah, the prime example being Tom Watson's famous "You're a miserable pipsqueak of a man, Gove," for which he was ejected from the chamber.
Yeah. There we are. Two mentions of Tom Watson in one PMQs.
Got him on a
I wasn't expecting
Jeremy
that.
Corbyn's in the building. Tom Watson getting fond recollections of Tom Watson on Times Radio. God, the world has turned upside down.
I could do a tight 10 minutes on Theresa May in a minute if you like. Right, we go back. What are we question number 5, I think we're at. Keir Starmer.
I think you'll find Mr. Corbyn doesn't have the whip. But I think that's a no then. Pathetic. He never takes responsibility for his words or action. They were all there. The Prime Minister also accused the BBC of not being critical enough of Putin. Would the Prime Minister have the guts to say that to the face of Clive Myrie, Lise Doucet and Steve Rosenberg, who have all risked their lives day in, day out on the front line in Russia and Ukraine, uncovering Putin's barbarism?
Let's just hop in there. He's now just reading out Justin Webb, isn't he? The whole thing's got... Is this what Justin Webb... I mean, I obviously wasn't listening, but I think others were. Justin Webb on the Today programme this morning asked exactly this question, saying that he was talking about Boris Johnson accusing the BBC of not being critical of Putin, and asked, can you come up with an occasion when Boris Johnson's put his life on the line for the truth, as Lise Doucette has, as Jeremy Bowen has, as Clive Myrie has?
Well, I've never listened to the Today programme.
I wasn't aware it was still going, but apparently it is. Apparently it is. It's not still going. Maybe it was just Justin. Maybe Steve Swinford, who tweeted this, just bumped into Justin Webb on the bus. Justin Webb just casting around looking for something to do. But it's an interesting. I mean, whether or not it's of any interest to the public, I do feel like we've gone slightly into the weeds here.
Yes, it's also it's slightly Twitter-brained, isn't it? In that
that's the thing I was looking for. I mean, it's asking Boris Johnson a question that Justin Webb's already asked about something that Boris Johnson said last night about Clive Myrie and the BBC in a meeting that no one was at, which was designed to cover up the conversation about Partygate.
I mean, it'll get 1,000 retweets, but I suppose nobody normal watches all it. Well, no disrespect to the viewers on YouTube, love you all, but yes, exactly.
They are 320 of my favourite people in the world. Somebody else has pointed out that Boris Johnson taking a swipe at Keir Starmer for being from Islington. Richard says Boris Johnson lived in Islington until his wife threw him out. Right, here we go then. I'm not sure where we are now. Let's go back to the House of Commons.
If the right honourable gentleman wants to join the Conservative Party and come and listen to the meetings of the Conservative Party, he's welcome to do it. But as I say, I think he's a Corbynister in an Islington suit. But I said nothing of the kind, and I have the highest admiration as a journalist and a former journalist for what journalists do. I think they do an outstanding. I mean, I think he should withdraw what he just said. It has absolutely no basis or foundation in truth.
Keir Starmer.
Well, I'm going to bet £1 he doesn't withdraw that.
I would agree. I mean, it's a classic Boris Johnson tactic. He's done this a few times, hasn't he? And it's also, something he often does in debate, in the chamber and out the chamber. He seizes on a perceived inconsistency in somebody else's speech. As he said to Ian Lavery when they were debating after a 2017 debate, he said, withdraw that, old boy, withdraw that, when Ian Lavery said, he's never been to a food bank in his life.
That's a new... We've not had an Ian Lavery before. It's been a while since we've had a Don't Touch the Lathe, but that's a real one for connoisseurs of the Patrick Maguire School of Imitation.
We heard the Corbyn attack again, and this is a rhetorical crutch for Boris Johnson, and I suspect it will be a crutch for the Tory campaign in 2024.
But what happens if, going into that election, Keir Starmer says, he's not even... I've kicked him out of the party.
Well, as he just said, yeah.
He's not standing... He doesn't have the whip. If he doesn't have the whip, he can't stand as the Labour candidate.
We are running against Jeremy Corbyn in Islington North. That is our...
Yeah.
Which I'm pretty sure will end up happening, given that the settled view of the Labour leadership is that Jeremy Corbyn, barring a complete change of personality, will never be a Labour MP again. So that's more difficult for the Tories to prosecute that argument. But I also think there'll be no shortage of press clippings from Keir Starmer's Trotskyite pamphlets, clips of him as a campaigning lawyer, that they dredge up and present him as and also the big unresolved question here, sort of slightly departing from that exchange, is what Labour say about the economy. We've got so many known unknowns about the next election, where this attack now might seem a bit eccentric, but it might in 2024 cut through to a deeper uncertainty about Keir Starmer.
Someone on Matt on YouTube says Patrick's right. No one normal watches this. So our social media people have now got a poll running.
Are you normal?
Is watching PMQs normal? So far, yes is ahead. Although 46% of people who are watching it say no, it is not normal. So there we go. Right, let's see if we can round things off with a, let's try and everyone redeem themselves. We've got one more exchange. This is question number 6 from Keir Starmer.
That's how he operates. A merely mouthed apology when the cameras roll, a vicious attack on those who tell the truth as soon as the cameras are off. Slander decent people in a private room, let the slander spread without the backbone to repeat it in public. How can the Prime Minister claim to be a patriot when he deliberately attacks and degrades the institutions of our great country.
Prime Minister, how many does he have? How many does he have? Mr. Speaker, you know,
Boris Johnson,
Sorry,
like
Mr.
me, was
Speaker.
confused as to whether or not Keir Starmer got any questions left.
No, premise, just a second. I want to hear the Prime Minister's answers. I expect it both ways. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, it is an indication of the depths to which he's willing to sink. That he accuses me. He accuses me of traducing journalists. What he says is completely without any foundation whatever. I did not attack the BBC last night for their coverage of Ukraine. He must be out of his tiny mind, Mr. Speaker. He must be out of his tiny mind. I said no such thing, and there are people behind who will testify to that. He is completely wrong, Mr. Speaker. That is the limit. That is the limit of his willingness to ask sensible questions today. We are getting on. This government is getting on with the serious problems that require attention. Fixing our energy supply issues, and by the way, undoing the damage of the Labour government that didn't invest in nuclear power for 13 years. We're with a nuclear power station every year. Standing up to Putin, Mr. Speaker, when he would have elected a Putin apologist. That's what he wanted to do, and he campaigned to do that. Mr. Speaker, and fixing our economy with record numbers of people now in work, productivity back above what it was, more than 500,000 people back on the payroll than there were before the pandemic began, Mr. Speaker. That is as a result of the decisions, the tough calls this government has made. We get on with the job while they flip-flop around like beach flounders on the beach, Mr. Speaker.
Beach flounders on the beach.
What's a beach flounder?
We'll fight them on the beach flounders. So, where to unpick that? I mean, so the interesting thing is the report that Boris Johnson did criticise the BBC came from that left-wing Corbynista apologist pamphlet that is the Daily Telegraph, the former employer of Boris Johnson.
Yes. One of the big reveals of today's session is that he still identifies as a journalist, which is quite touching.
Yes, and then he slightly corrected himself, didn't he? And he realised, I'm a former journalist. I'm
not entirely sure. That line of questioning from Keir Starmer didn't really end up in the place I expected it to. It sort of became a more general attack on Boris Johnson's integrity, didn't it? Rather than, as you said, a forensic Occam's razor logic progressing towards a point that sort of hoisted Boris Johnson with his own petard. It sort of just became an everything and nothing, all-purpose, one-size-fits-all attack on the Prime Minister as just a bit of a bad bloke, which is clearly something Keir Starmer believes. He's developing a knack for getting under Boris Johnson's skin, I think.
But you're right. He hasn't really furthered anything. And actually, where you could have needled Boris Johnson, well, when Boris Johnson says to Labour Party, you don't have a policy on energy, they do. They have they want a windfall tax. And actually, the revelation we had yesterday about this guy who's on £250,000 for running a company that went bust, and he's still being paid for the tax. That seems like quite a fruitful area potentially. Actually do a bit of the knockabout on parties and then zero in on some real life hard crunchy stuff. Might have been a better line of attack than drifting off into something that Boris Johnson did or didn't say last night at a meeting that may or not have been misconstrued as an attack on Clive Myrie.
Yeah, I don't think the whole, he was speaking at a private meeting of the 1922 committee. I mean, that's an academic distinction when the remarks are published anyway and are liberally leaked, including by, number 10 communications staff as the meeting happens. I also think Keir Starmer has improved markedly as a Commons performer over the past 2 years, but clearly I don't think he is particularly good at ad-libbing or extemporising still. As you say, a leader with a little bit more fleetness of foot, a little bit more assurance in the chamber, would be able to dodge and weave and perhaps adjust their line of argument beyond the odd one-liner. And it's never clear whether Keir Starmer does these himself. I think there are a few tells indeed in his choice of the specific former prime ministers he mentioned about who's writing those lines. All I'll say is, Robert Peel's hometown is shared with one of Keir Starmer's speechwriters.
Very good. Well, we will maybe Keir Starmer will be doing better if Ed Balls was sitting next to him in the House of Commons. We will talk
Perhaps.
about that. We will talk about that next. We'll also bring you the best of the rest of the questions from PMQs, and we'll find out, is it really true that Ed Balls wants to come back as an MP? We'll do that next after we get a news update from Rachel Jewell.
Across the UK, on DAB, online and on your smart speaker. This is Times Radio.
Thanks, Matt. Good afternoon. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has opened Prime Minister's questions by asking Boris Johnson why he hasn't resigned for breaking COVID rules when others have. The PM says he's getting on with the job and says he has explained to MPs why he bitterly regrets his Partygate fine.
I thank the right honourable gentleman. I feel he's in some kind of Doctor Who time warp. We had this conversation yesterday, Mr. Speaker, and I've explained why I bitterly regret receiving an FPN. I apologise to the House.
In the Commons yesterday, the Prime Minister repeatedly apologised to MPs but insisted he'd not believed a gathering in the Cabinet Room in Number 10 to mark his birthday had violated the regulations in place at the time. Ukraine has claimed a hospital sheltering 300 people in Mariupol has been bombed by Russian forces. The mayor of the city is urging residents to leave following a preliminary agreement with Moscow to operate a humanitarian corridor. Julian Assange's extradition to the US has moved a step closer. A court's formally issued an order for the WikiLeaks founder to be handed over to face espionage charges, and it's now up to the Home Secretary. The Metropolitan Police's acting commissioner has admitted cultural problems in the force are not down to a few bad apples. Sir Stephen House has told MPs there are efforts to root out unacceptable behaviour as fast as possible. Plenty of warm sunshine for most of us this afternoon, but cooler with mist and low cloud at times across north-east England and eastern Scotland. Nick Ellaby has the sports.
Interim Manchester United boss Ralph Rangnick admits there's a huge gulf in class between his side and Liverpool. Manchester United were beaten 4-0 at Anfield in the Premier League last night, a loss that dents their hopes of Champions League qualification. Ralph Rangnick says that was down to a lack of quality compared to the current league leaders.
It's just a different level. They have better players than we have if you look at it in total. And this is what was reflected by the results today. There will be a rebuild for sure, but right now that doesn't help us because we still have another 5 games to play.
Meanwhile, Jurgen Klopp says Manchester United is too powerful a club not to come back from their current malaise, but admits his Liverpool side were too good for their old rivals. Klopp's favourite bit of the 4-0 win, though, came on 7 minutes before a goal was scored. Liverpool fans applauded and sang "You'll Never Walk Alone" for an absent Cristiano Ronaldo, who's taking time out following the death of his baby boy.
Our people showed pure class, and the whole stadium together showed pure class. There's so many things that are much more important in life than football, and obviously we really feel for Cristiano and his family.
Tonight, Manchester City can go back to the top of the Premier League if they beat Brighton. Man City Brighton is live on TalkSport from 8 p.m. Iceland midfielder Sara Björk Gunnarsdottir says it's shocking for Women's European Championship group matches to be played at a training ground. Man City's Academy Stadium hosts 2 Iceland games at this summer's tournament and holds 7,000. Gunnarsdottir says it's not the respect the women's game deserves. Hosts England have sold out all of their Women's Euros group games at Manchester United's Old Trafford, Brighton's the Amex and Southampton's St Mary's. And it was a mixed day for British players at the Barcelona Open tennis yesterday. World number 10 Cameron Norrie won his first match of the clay court season. He came from behind to beat Belarus's Igor Gerasimov 5-7, 6-4, 6-4. But Dan Evans lost in straight sets to Italy's Lorenzo Musetti. Today, Emma Raducanu takes on American Storm Sanders in the Stuttgart Open.
This is Times Radio.
Good afternoon to you. It's Matt Chorley bringing you the best of the rest. We've just done PMQs Unpacked with Keir Starmer and Boris Johnson going at it. I'm still joined in the studio by Patrick Maguire, editor of the Times Red Box. First of all, explain Ed Balls.
Explain Ed Balls. Well, I'm going to let's assume the base level of knowledge among your listeners that they do indeed remember the former cabinet minister, one-time Strictly contestant, and now star of light entertainment, Ed Balls, who apparently, according to senior Labour sources to whom I talk fairly regularly, is angling for a return to the Commons, perhaps at the Wakefield by-election, and his candidacy is being pushed by none other than Mr Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister who was his patron and who he used to advise. And
on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely is this?
That's a really good question. Well, look, depends. It was written in Redbox as if it was on Tuesday rather, as if it was a likelihood of 10. As you know, all self-respecting journalists write their stories in such a way. There are lots of outstanding questions. The first is, it's a personal one for Ed Balls. Does he necessarily want to take the quite considerable drop in income that becoming an MP would involve? The second is a strategic one for the Labour Party. One, does it think it can win the Wakefield by-election? I think they should certainly be trying to, given the former MP is a convicted paedophile and they're considerably ahead in the polls. The other question is, do they want to be seen as the party of the future? Is having a sort of Blairite, Brownite throwback necessarily a good look for the Labour Party? And the third one is, if such a big beast comes back, a man who was, destined to be Chancellor in Ed Miliband's government before he lost his own seat to the irrepressible amateur opera singer and object of curiosity Andrea Jenkins in 2015, does he necessarily want to come back and content himself on the backbenches? How do you not make him Shadow Chancellor? He's one of the great economic minds of the Labour Party. And actually, he's also great mates with Rachel Reeves. They were a duo, weren't they, last time around? I think she was shadow working pension. Well, there we are. As I understand it, Ed Balls is actually in New York at the moment, and I suspect whatever he's doing is probably a lot more glamorous than sitting behind Keir Starmer. Well, he posted a picture of himself running on Instagram this morning, which clearly invited a quote tweet from an enterprising journalist saying he's running. He's running. Yeah, that's Sam Coates. He is not exactly discouraging this speculation. I think it's fair to say he has not issued a full and frank denial. Right, let's go back to the House of Commons then. This is the best of the rest. We'll kick off with Liz Saville-Roberts. She's a Plaid MP, quizzing Boris Johnson.
Plaid Cymru have been calling for 15 years for a law to ban politicians from being willfully misleading. New polling by Compassion in Politics shows that 73% of people support such a law. Will the Prime Minister support a lying in politics bill?
Mr. Speaker, it is well known that the rules of this House demand that we tell the truth in this House, and that's what we all try to do.
That's what we all try to do.
The intent is there.
Yes,
he's desperate.
He's doing his best. But there we are. That was.
I have to say, Liz Saville-Roberts, every time she gets a question, every 8 weeks or so, has a. Not that it's the substance that matters, of course, but she does have a great range of hair dyes. She's got this is one reason why you should be watching along live on very
YouTube.
Fetching hot pink.
Hot pink, yeah, I think is how we describe it.
That's the Welsh nationalist for you. They'd do anything for attention.
Well, not hair, but I spot he had some new glasses. Robert Jenrick, remember him, former cabinet minister? He popped up at PMQs as well. Let's take a listen to what he had to say.
Mr. Speaker, my constituent Aidan Aslin has served in the Ukrainian armed forces for 4 years. Last week, he was captured by the Russian army in Mariupol. Yesterday, a video emerged of my constituent handcuffed, physically injured, and being interviewed under duress for propaganda purposes. Would my right honourable friend agree with me that this is a flagrant breach of the Geneva Convention, that treating any prisoner of war in this manner is illegal, and that the interviewer, Graham Phillips, is in danger of prosecution for war crimes, and that any online platform, such as YouTube, which hosts propaganda videos of this kind, should take them down immediately.
I thank my right honourable friend very much, and I think everybody will want to will urge the Russian state to treat his constituent humanely and compassionately, because in my view, although we do not encourage people, in fact we actively dissuade people from going to that theatre of conflict, I understand that he'd been serving in the Ukrainian forces for some time, and his situation was very different from that of a mercenary, Mr. Speaker. I hope that he is treated with care care and compassion. I thoroughly echo the sentiments that my right honourable friend has expressed about those who broadcast propaganda messages.
I suppose as a reminder, there are important things going on in the world there, Patrick.
Yes, it is. And, you know, certainly it's not an unhelpful intervention from Robert Jenrick, who is treading an interesting line as a former cabinet minister, still, you know, very young, only been an MP for 7 years, ditched from cabinet in a very early stage of his career. He's developing quite a knack for asking questions that aren't unchallenging, that, you know, demand an actual response from the Prime Minister, but are nonetheless not actively unhelpful. For instance, he is the first MP to have hosted a Ukrainian family and, in diplomatic terms, expressed his frustration with how the process is going. And you can sort of you can file that question. You know, mild frustrations about the extent to which the government is helping his constituent there, but nonetheless not quibbling with the extent of its response.
And a break from all the Partygate questioning. There was another one. Richard Thompson popped up. Let's take a listen.
His bags and goes.
Minister.
Oh, I don't think that's the question, is it? I think.
Richard Thompson.
Oh, here we go. Richard Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister's fundamental political problem at the moment isn't about parties or fixed penalty notices or cake. It's about the lack of trust, integrity and credibility at the heart of government, which he himself now personifies. Mr. Speaker, when is the Prime Minister going to realise that people don't want to hear any more glib, half-hearted non-apologies or hear him witter on about getting on with the job? They just want this Pinocchio Prime Minister to pack his bags and go.
Mr. Speaker, I think when are the Scottish people going to hear any... sorry, Mr. Speaker, when are the Scottish people going to hear an ounce of sense from the Scottish Nationals?
Prime Minister, we both can't stand up at the same time. I'm trying to be helpful. We've got to be more moderate and taunting language use. Pinocchio is not acceptable. I'm sure the member wishes to withdraw it quickly.
Mr. Speaker, I withdraw that, but he packs his bags and goes.
Minister.
It's not a withdrawal.
Withdrawn it. Sorry, you've withdrawn it. You're with it. Let's get on. Prime Minister, withdraw.
This is a chaotic end to PMQs.
Answering anything?
Sorry, I don't know what his question is, Mr. Speaker. He's withdrawn it, but the answer is that we're going to get on the job. Get on with it. It'll be nice to hear an ounce of sense from the Scottish Nationalist Party or some competent government.
Rhys Villiers.
God, he's a... Wow.
So it can add that to the list of things you can't say in the House of Commons. You can't call someone Pinocchio.
Pinocchio is now unparliamentary. Yeah, it's interesting. I thought that...
I feel like we should do a whole thing on what you can and can't do in the House of Commons.
There's a big thing at 11 o'clock.
At 11 on a quiet week. Matt, come on, gents. What man's hair colour would you discuss?
Actually, Michael Fabricant. You read my column in the Times from Saturday.
Exactly right. In fact, if Boris Johnson turned up at PMQs and dyed his hair pink, I think we'd probably mention it.
Yeah, no. Also, anyway, whatever. I'm not going to defend. I think Liz Savvarovitz is very cool. Actually, it's a weird thing to say about a Plaid Cymru MP.
Yeah, no, exactly right. And and as Stephen points out, nobody's ever mentioned Boris Johnson's hair before. So
exactly.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, there we are. We've learnt something. You can't say Pinocchio in the House of Commons. That seems to be the main thing we've learnt.
You can't say anything these days.
Patrick Maguire, Red Box editor. If you want all of that, but in your inbox every morning, go to thetimes.co.uk/redbox. Sign up for Red Box right now. You need to be a Times subscriber. Right, up next, we're going to check in with Lucy Fisher. She's got some developments on exactly how this Rwanda policy will work. We'll talk about Netflix, and then we're going to do the quiz.
Mariella Frostrup, this afternoon from 1 on Times Radio.
We'll bring you the latest reaction to another blockbuster Prime Minister's questions as he faces the opposition on everything from Partygate to refugees. Will Young reflects on his career, well-being and keeping himself busy as he prepares to release 2 books and a new album. And we speak with the man behind the film that sparked protests at Moscow Film Festival, sharing a story of forbidden love in Soviet